Hello and welcome to this very last minute revision video. There were some complaints that these videos with a voiceover on PowerPoint were a bit boring, a boring voice, so now we've added a boring face. Now, you know how to do this, you know what your exam's going to be. There are 5 questions and then some writing that you'll do yourself, question 6 or 7. You know the anthology, there will be one text from here, the first half of the anthology in this paper, and one from here in the second. The 2 that I think are most likely are From Beyond Sky and Earth, The Journey to Bhutan, and The Danger of a Single Story. I'll go over them in this video in a little bit more detail, but first, a very quick overview of the questions. Now, question number 1, this relates to the unseen text. So paired with one of these, there will be a text that you've never seen before. You've practiced this, it was in your mock. And question 1 will always relate to the first few lines, and it will be very, very simple to answer, and you can get 2 marks with 2 words. It's basically saying, find 2 words that describe this place, for example. Question 2 is not much harder. They want you to show that you can read and understand something, so you just simply try to look at the next section of text, and again, they'll tell you the lines that you're allowed to use. You look at that section of text, highlight it, circle it, whatever you want to do, and then summarize it in your own words. The best way of doing this is simply to bullet point the things you learn. Go through 4, 5, 6 if you need to, things that you learn about that text. You're going to get the 4 marks for a maximum of 4. Question 3 is more understanding, but this time they're demonstrating, they're checking your ability to demonstrate understanding by reading between the lines. So you're not told it's a beautiful day, but you understand that it's a beautiful day. That's what they're looking for you. You're going to say, well, it was a beautiful day. The stuff that isn't explicitly mentioned, but that you know. So far, so easy, and these are the low mark questions about the unseen text. We then get on to question 4, which is always the same, and this is asking about your understanding of how writers achieve their effects on the reader. And the question's always virtually identical. How does the writer use language and structure to convey their ideas? Something along that line. What they're looking for is the techniques and their effect on the reader. A little bit more of that in a minute, because we're going to focus on those two texts that I think will come up. Question 5 we'll also focus on the next couple of slides, but this is not showing understanding of what the writers have said, but rather showing an understanding of who the writers are. So when you read a text, you read, for example, Stone Cold by Robert Swindells. What kind of person is this writer? What do they think? What do they feel? What are they trying to communicate and why? And that's what they really want you to do. And they ask you to compare 2 different writers to see if you can get an idea that not all works are written by the same person from the same viewpoint. They're written by a whole variety of different people with their own kind of understanding and aims and objectives. This can be thought of as the reading part of the paper, and there are no marks for your own spelling and grammar here, so get your ideas down as clearly as possible. You will then be asked either question 6 or 7. You get a choice of 2 prompts where you do your own piece of transactional writing. And what they're really looking for here is not a knowledge of a topic that you're writing about. They're just looking for your ability to structure a piece of writing to convey a message for a particular purpose. Can you be persuasive or informative or whatever? You can lie, you can make it up. You don't have to tell the truth, but try and make it believable. A little bit more on that later, but again, you've got that. You've all done that before, and you've done that well. So, Danger of a Single Story, first up. You should know this. We've done it in class. We've done it several times. In brief, it is the story of how Chimamanda Adichie learned something. It's a learning story. And the particular thing that she learned is that we can fall into a trap of believing one single point of view and thinking that is the whole point of view, when in reality there are multiple ways of viewing anything. Question 4 is the one that just explicitly looks at this text, and it's that question, how does the writer do something? Now, this was only been used once in the exam before, in November 2020, and the question 4 was, how does the writer use language and structure to convey her thoughts and opinions? It's a really, really broad question. And to rephrase that, what they really want to know is, what techniques does the writer use, and what is their effect on the reader? So, it's going to be the same basic question coming up this time. They might change little bits, but it'll be the same basic question. What techniques does she use? Well, lots of them, but the main technique is probably anecdotes. She uses 3 big anecdotes. What's the effect on the reader? Well, there are many different effects of anecdotes. You need to find the specific effects of those anecdotes. The most frustrating actually, not the worst answer, but the most frustrating answer to this question is where somebody says something like, the writer uses similes, and similes create images in the reader's mind. Yes, absolutely correct, and completely pointless, or nearly always pointless. What simile did the writer use, and what effect did that simile create? So, this particular writer, in Danger of a Single Story, uses anecdotes. She first tells a story about Fide that kind of breaks down the barrier between her and us. She looks a little bit stupid, and we kind of feel sorry for her and a little bit maybe embarrassed for her. It's certainly by being honest with us, it lowers that barrier between us, and we start trusting her. It builds empathy between us. She then tells another story about her classmate in America, or roommate rather, and how her roommate made assumptions about her, about music she liked, and whether she could cook with like a cooker or something. What's the purpose of that anecdote? Well, maybe we identify with the roommate because we're Western, and we feel a little embarrassed for the roommate. Go, oh, we would never do that, would we? Or maybe we kind of sympathise with Adichie a little bit, and we feel a little bit sorry for her. Or, she's that cringy moment where she says, yeah, I like Mariah Carey. And we kind of empathise with her again. It brings us a little bit closer, but it also starts to make us reflect on our own experience. The third anecdote is her going to Mexico, and she has fallen for the same trap again. What's the purpose of this? Well, the purpose of this is really to say everybody makes mistakes. Even I make mistakes. I'm not putting myself out there as some sort of saint who knows everything and is perfect. I make mistakes. And even when I learn the lesson, I still make mistakes again. This is a learning process. It's going to take some time. We lapse. It's okay. Do your best. So those 3 anecdotes basically get the idea of the single story being dangerous and limiting across. They also get the idea that a single story makes you look a bit stupid across quite well. And they break down the barrier between us and Adichie so that we trust her a little bit more, and we're just open to her ideas and we like her. You might find other techniques, and if I were you, I would go through and I would try and find other techniques, but those are probably the key ones that I would go to. Now, question 5 is going to compare it with a completely unknown text, one that you haven't read before. And this will always ask you to compare how the writers present their ideas and perspectives about something, or just in general. The last time this was asked, they said their perspectives about storytelling. Doesn't really matter. Basically, what you're doing is you're saying, how does the writer feel? How do I know? So, how does Chaminda feel? Well, if you go through that story, she feels stupid when she finds out Fide's family can do really nice things. She's cringing a bit, and she's kind of judging her roommate. Maybe she feels out of place, a little lost in America. Maybe she feels a little bit belittled by somebody looking down at her. Or maybe, I don't know, this is up to you to decide, she feels like she's looks down on her roommate, and she kind of thinks, wow, this idiot's judging me. How does she feel in Mexico? Well, she definitely feels stupid again, embarrassed again, perhaps. So all the way through, we get these ideas of how she feels. And the best way to answer question 5 is to kind of focus on them. How is the writer feeling at different stages? Are they feeling confident? Are they feeling unsure? Are they feeling embarrassed? Are they feeling scared? Are they feeling knowledgeable? Are they feeling empowered? Whatever you've got. And then you simply take all of those feelings and you contrast them with the other text. You can also look at whether they are directly involved, and EDEXCEL is. The 3 stories that she tells, she was there for it. It's personal, it's first-hand knowledge and first-hand experience that she's sharing. That might be different in a different text. And if you really want to, you can look at their purposes. What is the purpose of EDEXCEL giving that TED talk? It's to teach us something we've learned to make the world a better place. Why? Well, that's up for you to decide, but it might be as simple as she's a really nice person. She's learned something, she wants to share it with us to make the world a better place. That's fine. You then look at the other text and you go, is the other person trying to make the world a better place? Yes or no? Up to you to decide that. So, if this one comes up in your exam, and there's a really, really good chance, I think 50-50 chance it'll come up, because I think it'll come up this summer for sure. I think the question will be, how does the writer use language and structure to interest or engage the reader? Basically, the same question again for number 4. And we know number 5 will be, how do the writers present their perspectives and their ideas? So if I were you, because I think this is going to come around again very much the same, I would look at the past papers and the examiner reports and the answers that they gave last time and use them again. If they do give this a focus, by the way, for question 5, compare how the writers present their ideas and perspectives. Try and guess the question. I really can't think of anything solid that they could come up with. Present their ideas and perspectives about their childhoods. Well, that would only focus on a very small part of EDEXCEL's text, so I don't think they can do that. Their education, perhaps, because I think she was still in university when she went to Mexico, so perhaps they might give that focus, but effectively it's going to be the same question again. The other text that I think is very likely to come up this summer, and again I think you've got a 50-50 chance of getting this, is Beyond Sky and Earth, A Journey into Bhutan by Jamie Zepper. Now, same thing we're doing here. This text has been used twice before, in June 18 and June 21. And in the question 4, they asked these 2 questions. How does the writer use language and structure, of course, to give her impressions of Bhutan and to engage the reader? So the first one's a little bit more focused, the second one's the broadest question you can imagine. And again, what you're really looking to do here is pick out the techniques. I can't see them asking a different question. I'm pretty sure that when question 4 comes up, if this one is your text, they're going to ask you, how does the writer use language and structure to engage the reader, share their experiences? It's going to be a really broad question because there's nothing specifically focused that they can ask you. So what techniques does Zepper use? Again, look at the past papers, pick out the answers from the previous years, recycle them. Off the top of my head, well, she uses listing quite a lot. She uses repetition and listing. Repetition to show she's bored, listing to show things she's interested in. If you remember, mountains, mountains and more mountains, she's finding it dull. But when she walks out in the street, she sees the carved things up on the sides of the buildings. She's really quite excited about that, and she details all the things that she can see. So those would be 2 really solid points to start with. And then you can find another technique, I'm sure, fairly simply. Question 5 is, as always, compare how the writers present their ideas and perspectives. And they asked last time about their perspectives about their experiences, but don't worry too much about that. Again, think about, how does she feel? At the start, she's bored. At the end, she's interested. Is that the same or different in the unseen text? She seems to be a people person. She's not that fussed by the landscape. The mountains bore her, but the people are interesting. She's not particularly judgmental. In fact, certainly not negatively, but she is very impressed by people, and she's very positive when people show their aptitude for learning and languages. So again, she's positive towards the people she's talking about and not the place. So she's positive towards half of her topic. Is that the same or is that different in the unseen text? And these are the things that you're really trying to go through. Again, have a look at the past paper. read what they said in the examiner's report or the mark scheme about the good answers, steal them, recycle them. A lot of those will fit onto whatever question they're going to ask you this year. My predicted one is, I think, very, very broad. Basically, this is for question 4. How does ZEP use language and structure to engage the reader? It's the same question as interest the reader, really. They're really asking for those techniques. Question 5 will be, I think, exactly the same as it was the last 2 times. They just use the same question a 3rd time in a row. So, read those 2 texts through, go through the past mark scheme and examiner's report, look at the answers that they were expecting last time, make sure that you can explain a few of them in depth in your own word, and that is how I would spend the night before, half an hour of the night before. Finally, for the transactional writing, question 6 or 7, you'll have that choice of 2. You've gone through this over and over and over in class. So here are my top tips, if you like. Number 1, be really clear what you want to communicate. If they ask you to write about a dream destination, what is it that you want to communicate? How wonderful this place is, why we should go there. Be clear. Okay? Your gran might love to read a travel dialogue, a diary rather, of learning when you packed your suitcase and which seat you sat on the plane and all of that kind of stuff. And she might be fascinated, but the wider reader just isn't. They don't care. They want to know what the place was like if it's travel writing. So think about your purpose quite carefully and speak to that audience. That is the key point about the top tip. Clear what you want to communicate it to those people. These things go hand in hand. I think it is a very good idea for you to copy that structure used in Danger of a Single Story. You basically follow a story mountain. You have this problem or this lack of knowledge or something. You get 3 stories on your way to enlightenment and understanding up there, just like Adichie did. We practiced that in class. I would go with that unless it totally doesn't work for you or you've got another version, another structure that does work for you. Definitely make sure that you communicate your idea effectively. So if your audience is other school children, stories are going to work quite well. If your audience is the local government, then stories will also work quite well, actually. They work well on everybody. But you might also find a little bit more success with facts and figures and structure and logic and reason. It's up for you to decide the way forward. But if I were you, I would go with that story. Whichever way you do go with it, make sure you use paragraphing, punctuation and vocabulary strategically. And that means don't just pick out all the long words you can think of because they're nice long words. Pick out words that reinforce the feeling that you want your audience to have. So if you want them to feel motivated, pick out motivating language. If you want them to feel embarrassed, pick out vocabulary that will help them feel embarrassed or whatever you're doing. Same with punctuation and paragraphing. Check the other videos on the YouTube site or the iGCSE site, specifically about ways of doing that. Strategic basically means looking at your overall aim and working towards that aim. So rather than thinking about vocabulary on a sentence by sentence level, think about making it stronger as you go through your piece. Think about using punctuation to slow the reader down and speed them up at different stages in your work, depending on whether or not you want them to be dwelling on that idea or skipping over it a little bit. Finally, when you've finished, read your work afterwards as if you've never read it before. Make sure it works. If there's a bit that's long and stodgy, long sentences, complicated ideas, break it up, change it up. If there's a bit and you think, would my audience know what I mean here? Have I explained it enough? And you haven't, add something to explain it. Now you might know who Bob is that you went on holiday with, but the rest of the world might not. You might know what a catamaran is. If you went to Ibiza on a catamaran, your audience might not. So those little details to show your reader or your audience an awareness of who they are and what they need to understand in order to understand your message are quite important. Put those details back in. Okay, you've got this, I'm sure. I am absolutely sure that you will do really well. Good luck.